Thank you so much to each one of you for taking time out of your day and your busy schedule to be here. And for those of you that couldn't join us, thank you so much for your prayers and just your support. Many of you know bits and pieces of my story, but not necessarily my whole story. So felt like I needed to just kind of share more of my story with you. I was born into a family with 2 older sisters and a father with a Catholic background and a mother with a Protestant Presbyterian background. Growing up, my parents' marriage wasn't all roses and sugar plums. There were times I feared that their marriage would end in divorce. In elementary school, my sister's mom and I began attending a different church than my dad. At the time, I didn't know that God would place me in just the right church at just the right time. Around 4th or 5th grade, I participated in a Wednesday night program where my teacher was Carol Strangway. From the very first night, I felt a connection with her. Carol would instill in me a desire to know God deeper, to lead other children into a growing relationship with Jesus, and would be my mentor from that day forward. As I entered into middle school, I began volunteering in children's church, sang in the youth praise band, and had a desire for overseas missions. I was beginning to learn what it meant to have a faith of my own. In high school, I took on more responsibilities at church and went on multiple mission trips to Mexico. However, deep in my soul, I didn't love myself, much less like myself. I struggled with my self-confidence and appearance. I was very good at hiding my feelings and developed a coping mechanism of pushing my feelings deep down inside. This unhealthy habit would eventually take its toll on my physical being. On the outside, I was happy and high on Jesus, but in the inside, I was broken and longed for God to heal me. I went away to Erskine College and continued my normal pattern, living on the outside, but dying on the inside. I immersed myself in all the campus ministries and even attended a small church where I was the minority. After my freshman year, I discovered that the major I thought I was going to pursue, music, was out of my reach due to an undiagnosed hearing problem with certain pitches. I switched my path to education because my sisters were educators as well as several of my aunts. It was a safe major with rewarding monetary and non-monetary benefits. The summer of my freshman year, my mentor Carol was going to be out for 6 weeks for surgery. The staff of my home church felt confident in allowing me to be the interim children's pastor at the age of 19. For the first time, I began to feel a little alive on the inside, and I knew God's plan for me involved working with children. I headed off to college my sophomore year with a new sense of purpose. I started a children's church in the small African American church I had been attending. My plan was to earn a degree in education and then head off into the world as a missionary. I felt God closer than I ever had before. However, my junior year would prove to be my hardest yet. Let me back up. At the age of 2, I suffered from a seizure as a result of a medication I was taking for my asthma. I would stop breathing in the driveway of my grandfather's house. My papa would give me CPR all the way to the hospital. I would enter into a coma surrounded by a plastic bubble, as my sisters used to call it. I came out of the ICU on Mother's Day, and from that point on had a very close relationship with my papa. This would also be the first time that God chose to save my life. So fast forward to my junior year of college. I received a phone call from my parents that my sweet papa had passed away suddenly. I was devastated. I became very angry at God. Why would he allow such a horrible thing to happen? He wasn't even sick. I began my withdrawal from church, finding any excuse I could to avoid going. I tried hard to keep up my appearance on the outside, but once again, I was dying on the inside. I pushed my feelings down deep inside and refused to face them. Unknown to me, I was spiraling into a deep depression. After college in 2005, I returned home to teach kindergarten at a local school. However, the stress of my first year teaching, combined with my suppressed feelings, would rear its ugly head. I contemplated suicide and wanted to do nothing except stay in my bed. Thankfully, a concerned teacher friend and my parents decided that something needed to be done. I had seen a counselor in earlier years, but wanted nothing to do with her now. Thankfully, God gave my counselor the wisdom to suggest that I be sent to a week-long intensive therapy program outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Of all the programs they could choose, they chose horse therapy. I was deathly afraid of horses after a family friend's son was killed while riding a horse as a child. I entered the program extremely reluctantly. I fought tooth and nail in every session and refused to get anywhere close to the horses. All I wanted to do was make it through the week and get home to let my counselor and my parents know how mad I was at them. On the last afternoon of therapy, my group was gathered in the corral with one horse. Our therapist wanted each of us to walk the horse around the circle. I watched as each person attempted to get the horse to walk. On this particular day, the horse was being very stubborn. And every time they tried, they were unsuccessful. I tried to hide so I would be overlooked by the therapist and the whole thing could be over. However, the therapist knew my plan and called me out. I reluctantly walked towards the horse, knowing that he wasn't going to move. He hadn't moved for anyone else. To my surprise, the horse began to walk. I looked up and the sky literally opened, and a ray of sunshine shone down on me. A breeze began to blow, and I heard my papa's voice as clear as day. He said, "Don't be angry at God. God needed him to watch over me, and he would be with me every step of my life." I wept and wept, all the while holding on to the horse's lead and walking the horse around and around the corral. That was the day that I heard God's audible voice, and the day that changed my entire life. Thanks to my parents and my counselor, this was the day that my life was saved. I spent many a week on my counselor's couch, learning how to deal with all the emotions that I had hidden deep down inside of me. I learned new and healthy ways of coping with my emotions. Most importantly, I grew closer to God, allowed him to repair the broken cistern in my soul, and to fill me with his refreshing Holy Spirit. The longing in my soul to minister to children that was planted early in my life began to blossom. I became more involved in church and volunteered every chance I had. I had a desire to go into full-time ministry, but didn't have the courage to leave my safe and secure job as a teacher. In October of 2013, after receiving the flu shot, like every other year, I suffered multiple seizures that left me incapacitated. I was in the neurological ICU for a week in Athens before the decision was made to transfer me to Atlanta. Doctors could not explain the cause of the seizures and were ambivalent of my recovery. Before leaving for Atlanta via an ambulance, a friend of mine gave my family a prayer pager. It was literally an old beeper pager. The number was broadcast all over social media and beyond. Every time someone prayed for me, the pager would buzz. After a week at Emory Hospital in Midtown Atlanta, the doctors told my family there was nothing else they could do, and they should prepare themselves that I would never return to my normal self. My family sent out an urgent message for people to pray. That night, they pleaded to God for a miracle. The pager, which they had taken to the hotel, went off 24/7. Prayers were being lifted up all over the country, and from people that we didn't even know and will never know. The next morning, my parents walked into my Atlanta hospital room, and my eyes were opened for the first time. Doctors said there was a long road to recovery ahead. They said I may never walk, talk, or function like a normal person. However, my family knew that God had already performed one miracle, and he could perform another. I came home and began intense physical, speech, and occupational therapy. I had to relearn everything. The most basic skills were foreign to me. My family and friends were very patient and encouraging during this time. I would get very frustrated when I couldn't take care of myself or remember how to do something. And in therapy, every time I wanted to give up, the pager would go off, and it was a reminder to me that God was cheering me on and that he was in control, and it was his way of reminding me that he was right by my side. Miraculously, after just 3 months, I returned to teaching in January like nothing had happened. The only continued thing I experienced was some short-term memory loss. God used this time to draw my family, friends, and me closer to Him and to deepen our faith. This would also be the second time that God chose to save my life. After 10 years of teaching, God had strengthened my faith enough to step out into the unknown and a scary place, full-time ministry. I left my teaching job and accepted a position as a kids pastor in Texas. God placed the Hillsong, Oceans, especially this part. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Help me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. That was the theme song for my heart. I finally felt like I had reached a place that God had been calling me to for so many years. I had reached my dream job. Just a couple months, though, after starting my job, my long struggle with endometriosis became life-threatening. After years coping with various attempts to remedy the situation, the thing I dreaded most came true. I saw a specialist in Texas who discovered that the endometriosis had spread outside of my uterus and threatened to spread throughout the rest of my body. The only remaining option was a hysterectomy. I had dreamed since I was a little girl of being a mommy. I couldn't wait to experience the incredible feeling of a baby growing inside of me and then giving birth. Now, at the age of 32, that dream was crushed, and I was devastated. Once again, all those feelings of anger towards God bubbled up. How could He allow this to happen? I had done everything right my whole life. People who don't even want kids have kids every day. But I can't have a kid, the thing that I longed for the most. Stopping right here in the story and looking back months later, I see that was my issue. I longed for a child more than I longed for Jesus. I couldn't see that this was part of God's protection of me. Months later at a conference, God spoke to me in an audible voice. He said that had I gotten pregnant and given birth, my child, me, or both of us would not have made it. God confirmed this by impressing the same thing on my dad's heart back in Georgia. He also said that just as He promised Abraham that his descendants would outnumber the stars in the sky, so would my descendants. I couldn't fathom how this could even be possible. More months passed, and I continued to process what He had spoken to me. I came to realize that the descendants were the lives of the children and families wherever I was ministering. I also realized that for a third time, God saved my life. My ministry continued, and I loved my dream job. I thought Texas was going to be where my husband and I would settle and eventually raise a family through adoption. I had become very involved in Love 146, an organization that fights sex trafficking, and became the chair of our local task force. I was so wrapped up in ministry that I ignored the warning signs that my husband was spiraling into depression. Moving halfway across the country and leaving our family was hard on both of us. However, I had made connections quickly, and he was still searching for where he fit in. Looking back, I can see that he began to cope with his depression by taking his computer gaming hobby to the extreme and allowed it to become an addiction. He also got into an addiction of spending money. When he came home one night and told me that he had contemplated suicide, I knew things needed to change. He started going to counseling, and I began to search for a job closer to our family. In February of 2017, he attempted suicide and was admitted into a facility for recovery. His parents came out to Texas and brought him back to Georgia for treatment. Meanwhile, I took a leave of absence from my job and also came home. Just a few months later, I left what I thought was my dream job and moved back permanently to Athens. I once again found myself on my counselor's couch, processing through everything. I began to work at a local restaurant and became the night manager. My husband and I made the decision to separate. I was living with my parents and enjoying the job at the restaurant, but I longed to get back into ministry. Then, in November of 2017, God opened a door for me to go back to school. I received a random monthly newsletter from Athens College of Ministry. The newsletter was advertising for a work-study position that included receiving a master's degree in Christian ministry. I was an ordained minister, but I didn't have a degree in ministry. Taking this work-study position meant taking a huge leap of faith. First of all, I would be going back to school after years away as a student, but more so, it meant leaving my job at the restaurant. I would be leaving a job with an income to take a job without an income. My degree program would be covered as a part of my work-study agreement, but I would need to raise support to cover my monthly expenses. Now, coming from a family with a CPA as a father, this was very scary and a bit unsettling. I knew that missionaries overseas raised support, and I'd raised support for short-term mission trips, but this was different. This was in my city. Would people understand? More importantly, did I have enough faith to trust that God would provide? As I prayed and sought wise counsel, God revealed to me that this was the next step in my journey. He brought me back to Athens for such a time as this. I also came to realize that God had saved my life 3 times. When I looked into the number 3 in the Bible, I discovered that the number 3 is used 467 times in the Bible, and it's a picture of completeness. There were 3 righteous patriarchs before the flood: Abel, Enoch, and Noah. After the deluge, there were 3 righteous fathers: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Trinity, speaks to God's nature and character of completeness. Jesus' ministry was 3 years. Jesus prayed 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane before his arrest. He was placed on the cross at the 3rd hour of the day, 9 a.m., and died at the 9th hour, 3 p.m. There were 3 hours of darkness that covered the land while Jesus was suffering on the cross, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. 3 is the number of resurrection. Christ was dead for 3 full days and 3 full nights, a total of 72 hours before being resurrected. There were only 3 people who witnessed Jesus' transfiguration on Mount Hermon: John, Peter, and James. So if God chose to save my life 3 times, and 3 was such an important number in the Bible, how could I not trust him? So in December, I began working as the president's administrative assistant, began raising support as a missionary to Athens, and quit my job at the restaurant. I started my degree program in January, taking a full load of classes, and stepped out onto the ocean with faith that God would not let me sink. These past 6 months, God has grown my faith in more ways than I could ever imagine. My bank account never has a lot of money, but every time a bill is due, I receive a donation. It's a whole new way of living, truly depending on God to provide each day. I finished my first semester with all A's, and am currently in summer classes. God continues to reveal bits and pieces of this picture he is painting in my life. I don't know fully yet, but I know that somehow he is going to use my story and my experiences to minister to children and families. I just returned home from a mission trip to Oban, Haiti with my church, Athens Church. I'm so appreciative to each and every one of you who prayed for us and supported me. Our team ministered to children, teaching them about joy. We encouraged the women, sharing with one another the joys and the fears of raising children. While on the trip, I learned that the people we ministered to struggle with the same exact things that we struggle with here. God hasn't called me to Haiti, but God has called me to live in Athens. And Athens just as Haiti is a mission field. There are approximately 123,912 people living in Athens. This includes students attending UGA. According to the 2010 census, approximately 76,163 people have zero ties to a Christian church. That is approximately 86% of the population. The city has over 80 churches, and yet 86% of the population doesn't know Jesus. And I would venture to say that 8 years later, that's probably higher. Yes, there are people overseas who need to hear about Jesus, but our city is also in desperate need of seeing and experiencing the hands and feet of Christ. One of the things that I love about Athens College of Ministry is that it's not tied to any denomination. In fact, it prides itself on being open to anyone. The college works very hard to create a sense of unity among churches in the Athens area. I've been able to experience this firsthand. Along with nonprofits like Athens Prayer Network, God has big plans for the city of Athens, and part of that plan involves a sense of unity. I'm excited that God has allowed me to be a small part of this unification. The more that we can put our religious denominations and differences aside, the more we can reach the lost people of this city by simply being the hands and feet of Jesus. Again, I want to thank each one of you for your sacrifice to trust God in supporting and encouraging me. So how can you be a part of this incredible mission? First of all, everyone involved in the mission needs your prayers. When God starts moving in big ways, the devil comes out and tries to derail his progress. I personally need your prayers as I live out my portion of this mission. Finally, I also need your financial support. I'm living on a skinny budget, but still have $2,700 of consistent monthly support to go. If you're already a part of my support team, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to join my support team, I'd love to have you join me. The ability to be fully supported monthly means that I am able to fully focus on and live out this mission that God has called me for here in Athens. I would like at this time to introduce Dr. Marcia Wilbur, President of the Athens College of Ministry, to share a little bit about the mission of the college, as well as what it looks like for me to be a missionary to the city of Athens. Please welcome Dr. Marcia Wilbur.
Thank you, Katie, and I want to thank you too for being here and for hearing your story. And Katie, thank you for sharing so many details. I think it encourages the rest of us to know that it's okay to be human and that God sees it all. Katie asked me to share just a little bit about the college. Like Katie, this has been an adventure of stepping out in faith. God said, do this thing, and I said, yes, sir. And that's the long of the short story. And what an adventure it's been. We have been in existence now. We're starting our 6th academic year at the end of August, and we've grown from 7 students to 43 students, which is pretty incredible. We were accredited a year ago, and if you've ever built accreditation from the ground up, it's not. I say it's not for sissies. But Katie's part in the college is significant because we are, as she mentioned, positioned so that we can be an interdenominational Christian college. Very deeply Christian. Our belief statement is evangelical in nature, but we want to stop disagreeing with each other about who Jesus is, and he knows who he is, and just agree to be his hands and feet. So the hallmark of our college is really about reaching, teaching, and leading those people who need to know Christ more. And many of them are in our area churches. They're hurting, they're experiencing things like Katie did, where they're just really seeking God in the midst of the hard stuff. And we want to help them find him. And so we don't define ourselves as a seminary per se, but a ministry college, because guess what? If you're a believer, you're in ministry. And many folks just don't know what it means to be in ministry, what it means to share their faith, what it means to stand in faith when you're pretty sure you're going to crumble. And so that's what we're about, is equipping the saints to do the work of the kingdom, because, as Katie said, there is much, much, much work to do. When we think about the fact, statistically, that at least 85% of the state of Georgia does not yet have a saving relationship with Lord Jesus Christ, that should not be acceptable to any of us. And Katie's role at the college is significant, because not only is she getting equipped to do ministry in the most effective way possible, she is also supporting all of those other students who are getting equipped, because we can't do what we do without the right number of people at the helm. And I think about how long we prayed for the Lord to send an executive assistant to our team, and the wait was so worth it, to bring someone who's well educated, who loves the Lord, who is incredible at everything her hands touch. I'm the happiest person on the planet, because we couldn't have imagined anyone better than Katie to join our team. We absolutely love her. And I want to encourage you to please be prayerful about generously supporting her. It's very wonderful to receive one-time gifts, but what helps the most is when people will come aside and say, you know what, I want to be a regular monthly supporter, because that just helps to kind of calm the nerves a little bit, to know that month after month after month, you can depend on the fact that everything is going to go smoothly while you're doing the thing that the Lord has called you to do. And I firmly believe that all the resources that we need to answer our calling, God has already provided, and they're in the hands of His faithful, and He's just asking His faithful to release those. So I would just want to encourage you to support Katie in any and every way you can, and especially, of course, with your prayers, because your supporting her helps us better support all of the students who come to our college, support the faculty who teach there. And I promise you, as we stand up different community events, our prayer conference, our teaching conference, Katie is right there in the trenches, using her hands and feet to serve everybody who comes, and it's a really beautiful thing. And not one person leaves our conferences going, well, that was a waste of time. Everybody leaves saying, wow, God really met me here today, and this was life-changing. That's the adjective we hear every time we go out and we bring the body of Christ together. They say this was life-changing. So thank you, Katie, for changing lives, and thank you all for supporting Katie on her endeavor to do the same. And I'll just ask the Lord to bless you in abundant measure.
Once again, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come and support me and to listen to my story. And for those of you that will listen to this online, thank you so much. Each one of you means something very important to me, and you have been a piece along my journey. And I wouldn't be where I am today without each and every one of you. So thank you very much. And as Marcia said, may God bless you abundantly. Thank you.